pin router?
No.
No.
No?
No.
So the pin router, I use the pin router for two basic things. What I'm going to show today is use it specifically for cutting out F-holes for an instrument. So you basically have a form that follows a pin, and when I came in, I'm pretty sure I'm the last person to have used it, because it looks like a lot of stuff was just stacked on here and stuff, and this actually got moved. One important thing is you need to make sure that your bit and pin are actually lined up. If they're not, your cut is going to be in the wrong place. So basically, it's just going to follow a form on the pin, and the router is just going to cut out that shape. Now I have a bit that's a little bit larger than my pin in this instance, and it's making a larger size F-hole, but because on this particular instrument, I'm going to bind this with a binding that'll bring down that size a little bit. The other thing that the pin router is used for is, you can see how this is a shape specifically on the top and the back. And this starts off, this isn't bent. This is carved from a solid piece of wood. This is book matched. This is a big leaf maple. It's book matched, which just simply means, we all know what that means. You open it up, it's glued together. And so this is big leaf maple. It was 1 inch thick. And what I typically do is, in the past is what I've done, I do it a little bit different now, is I have a series of guides that basically I clamp onto the piece of wood. I cut out the basic shape so I know where it goes. The guides are different sizes. I run the router around and basically stair step it until I get to the basic shape I want. And then it's all hand planes, plane it down to where I want it to go. And then I sand it till I get pretty close to what I want. Then I bring it to the pin router. The pin router, I put a ball end on it, and I have a different pin that actually has a rounded guide on it. And all it is a piece of wood that's got a hole in it that sits on the pin, and the piece of wood's about this big around, and it's just rounded. And so then what I do is I set my depth on my pin router so that it just barely takes off wood. I then take it, so I've got the back side, the outside ready, flip it over, the inside's flat. I put it on the pin, run the pin router down, and it makes a small cut, and I just kind of move the piece around slowly. And I gradually get it deeper and deeper, taking off more and more material, and real slow. It takes a couple of hours, and there is much wood all over the place, much shavings to be had. And those pieces, and until it gets down to about this thick for a top. The back I leave a little bit thicker, and so then I'm rough cut on the inside as well. I then go back with my planes, and the planes that I typically use have a nice little handle. It's all brass. It's convex on the outside to allow me to get in there and carve and keep that. Once I get it pretty flush, I've got a deep-throated measurement gauge for depth. I can check that. The whole time you're doing this, you're also picking up the piece and you're feeling it and tapping it for where vibration goes. Because ideally what you want is you want this whole part of the plate, top and back, to vibrate. They work in unison just like a violin does. And so you start tapping the plate and feeling for the vibrations. And you get a feel for where it is and where it isn't. You start taking off a little bit of material. The top gets braced. There's 2 spruce braces in here. In this case, this is X braced. It'll give a little bit different, a little bit more of a mellow voice than the other type, which is a parallel brace that comes out. Your bridge just floats on top. It just sits there. String tension holds it down on the top. The back is the same. You're still going to carve the back, and you're going to feel for those vibrations. Glue your box together, and now the fun begins. Now you start carving. This is called the recurve. And the recurve is what will allow the top and the back, that releases that top and the back to vibrate a little bit more and give that the characteristic voice and sound.
Doesn't get a sound peg? Doesn't get a sound peg?
A sound peg?
Yeah, like
No, it doesn't. It doesn't need it because it has the 2 braces. On a cello and a violin, you have a sound post. and the sound post is about underneath the bridge on the treble side, I want to say, from what I recall. And that helps it helps strengthen the top, because the top on a violin is a little bit thinner than on a guitar, but you don't have the braces that run down. And the tension that you have on the top is directly proportional to your angle of your strings over the bridge and how heavy of gauge strings you have. The heavier gauge of strings you have, the more tension there is on the entire instrument. So you brace and build according to what your plan is for that.
Are you a guitar player yourself?
I am, yeah, which helps. I work with a guy who builds classical guitars who doesn't really play, but he loves to build, and I've always wondered how that works if you don't play as to the sound. He brings them occasionally and I'll play them, and I'm not a classical guitar player, so he plays like a guitar. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. In a steel string guitar and in a jazz guitar, which is what this is going to be, I understand that difference in dynamics and feel. I've played for 30 some odd 40 years, long time.
You have two different kinds of wood?
Yeah, the top on the guitar is typically, this is actually Sitka spruce. I carved this top, probably 25 years ago. And it just kind of sat around because there's probably 150 hours just in the top alone, just because of how much time it took to carve. Now the back was actually done on a duplicator at Palomar when I was still teaching at Palomar. I had bought the sides from Gilmore Wood. Anybody know Gilmore Wood? Up in Oregon. I had bought the sides from Gilmore Wood, and they said, I don't really have a back for it right now, but I've got some great sides for you and stuff. And when I called him back about 15 years later, he actually remembered me and said, you know what, I think I got, it's really green, but I got a back for you. So he sent me the back, and it was really green and terrible, but just gorgeous, gorgeous figure, and it was the right price too. So it sat on the shelf aging for about 10 years, and it's been there ever since. But they had a duplicator over at Palomar that nobody ever used. It had multiple pins, and you basically set a form in, and I have a form at home that I had made from using this that basically has the carve for the back. And so put the form in, basically a pin follows that form, and you have another router bit that just basically goes back and forth and cuts your shape out. So whereas I've got many hours in the top, I probably have less than 25 in the back.
Now, when you put a neck on that, that's awful thin. How does it hold with the tension in the strings?
It's not a problem because you've got a block here and a block here. So the block on the back is about as wide as your finger and about that big. And that's just to keep the sides together and give a little bit of place for your back and top to glue onto. The front, though, the block's a little bit bigger. It's about this big. So I'll actually cut a dovetail there for the neck. So the neck will be a dovetail, and the difference in how it dovetails in angle-wise is a 1/16 of an inch from top to bottom, total width difference. So it's a pretty snug fit.
Yeah.
But I've got a jig for that as well at home that works really, really well. Pretty simple stuff. So if you want to see, I can cut one out.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you always use the same size router bit?
No. Generally, yeah. It depends on what you're cutting out. If you're actually, in this case, this bit fit what I was going to need. So I would go with what I needed. There are some other size pins in here, a little bit larger. So if you were going to look at it to put something actually larger, you can certainly do that and then adjust your bit accordingly.
Bit and pin have to be equal.
If that's what your cut requires. In this case, you can see that these sound holes are different. You can see how much bigger this is than this one. This is going to be an unbound sound hole. This one's going to be bound. It'll end up being about the same width total once I get it bound. And the binding's just, it'll be a white or a cream colored plastic, a celluloid. So this is not a quiet machine though. You do need to make sure that you have room to move, so check it before you move. to make sure you're not out bumping into the arm on this.
Looks like it takes a little arm strength.
It doesn't, it's just more my fear of it moving off the pin. It really doesn't take a lot of arm strength. It makes a nice clean cut. It's really a pretty simple tool to use if your guide is good. I made this guide years ago. I knew a guy who had one where I lived before, so I had made that before I moved here and just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. But that's basically the whole use of it. I'm sure there's other applications you could use it with a rounded, you know, a ball type cutter if you wanted to use it as a template to just etch something in, words, whatever it is you wanted to do. You could use it for just about anything. It's just going to follow whatever your form is.
It seems like the tough part is making the form.
I'm sure it is.
Because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
gotta lay it out just exactly right.
Well, and yeah. With this one, what I did was I've got 2 different templates for different sizes of this, you know, of the actual F-hole. And basically, so I made my measurements. I laid it on. I drew it out. I cut it out by hand, smoothed it out, and just trimmed it up so that I knew I had what I wanted. And then just put a couple clamps on it. It was good to go. Keep your center line centered.
You don't have to worry about dust build up on the pin. when it
You
goes
do
on?
have to worry about it a little bit. I tried to blow some of it out. That can be an issue. You just need to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So as you move around, you can move the piece a little bit, and sometimes just the wind from the motor will move it around a little bit, so you can keep the pin against the form.
Do you feed one direction only against the cutter? Or?
I haven't really had that much of an issue. Got little issues here, but I mean it cleans up pretty nicely. I really haven't found that there's a huge issue as long as the bit's sharp.
Cool.
So, Ron, direction of rotation doesn't matter.
I haven't found that to be an issue. I'm sure it would be. This bit's pretty sharp, and again, I'm cutting spruce. It's like butter.
And you're making a small cut.
I'm making a small cut. Yeah, essentially. So I haven't had an issue with it.
Okay.
Ron, do you know if there's an instruction booklet?
Not that I know of. I would venture to say if you went online, you could probably find some other videos of other things that you can do with it, because I'm sure that there is.
No, there it is.
Ah.
Any other questions for him?
There are some shims you need to be aware of, because it looks like at some point this can get a little bit of wiggle. The shims keep it just in line. And as long as one was out yesterday, and I found that I had a pretty good wiggle when I put it back in, it's good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.